So I was 16 weeks into my second pregnancy when I had a miscarriage while I was home by myself. I was coached by phone by my OBGYN how to cut the umbilical cord, and then I promptly began to hemorrhage.
We have Dr. Jessica Zucker.
Dr. Jessica Zucker, it is such a pleasure to have you on this side of the mic.
Jessica Zucker is a Los Angeles-based psychologist specializing in reproductive health and the author of the award-winning book, I Had a Miscarriage.
I am thrilled to have psychologist and author Jessica Zucker on the show today.
The research shows that a majority of women are reporting self-blame, feelings of shame, feelings of body hatred in the aftermath of loss. And I was just like, this is unacceptable. I was beside myself. Do we wait for an anesthesiologist, or do we just do this quickly and get it over with unmedicated? I figured the pain couldn't be worse than what I had already been through. And then I wasn't pregnant anymore. And then my milk came in. Just to make matters worse, my first book came out in March of 2021, and then I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Hi, Dr. Zucker. Welcome to All Over Again podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. I wish we were sitting together in person, though.
I do
It's been
too.
a long time coming.
Exactly, but we finally made this happen.
Yes, we did.
And so I'll dive right in. I have a lot to talk to you about, and I want to start with all things you. Please tell me 3 adjectives to describe yourself.
Ooh, hardcore. You're getting right into it. Compassionate, passionate, tenacious.
I like that.
To those words?
Those are awesome.
Okay.
I
I
can't wait
could have
to-
thought about it a little bit more. I guess there are others, but yeah, I feel like central to my work and my being is compassion for sure. And then passionate. Yeah, I think that's clear through my work as well, and just my sort of perseverance through what I've lived through and what I do work-wise and the books I've created as a result. And then tenacious kind of ties those others in, and I just keep on keeping on.
And I can't wait to hear how those adjectives play out through our conversation, because I am sure they will. So, knowing what you know now, what would you do all over again and why?
Oh my goodness. Knowing what I know now, what would I do all over again and why? Oh, girl. I don't think I would do things differently. I don't know.
You say this now, but in 20 minutes, you're going to say, oh, you know what I would do differently.
Right. Do you mean any aspect of my life?
Any aspect of your life. And you know what? Why don't we table that question?
Okay.
And we'll come back to it, because it'll play out a little bit more.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. Wow, these are good. I just hadn't thought about it.
What was the inspiration? Okay, your career has been, and your personal life has been very centered around women's reproductive health. It's interesting how that sort of has played out both professionally and personally. What was the inspiration behind getting involved professionally in women's reproductive health?
Great. Okay. So I'm a Los Angeles-based psychologist, and I have been working in this field for about 15, 16 years at this point, specializing in women's reproductive and maternal mental health. And I come to the field with a background in public health. I worked in international women's rights before pursuing my PhD. And so my vision when I opened my private practice was to sort of marry my interests in public health with the clinical. And up until that point, I think I was just passionate about all things women, because I myself am a woman and believe in women's rights and women's mental health. But I had yet to live through something firsthand that informed my sort of career trajectory, my passion, my dedication, until I did. So I was 16 weeks into my second pregnancy when I had a miscarriage while I was home by myself. I was coached by phone by my OBGYN how to cut the umbilical cord, and then I promptly began to hemorrhage. My husband, meanwhile, was darting through LA traffic to get home to me. And my doctor suggested that we bring the fetus to her office in a bag for testing. And we made it to her office as quickly as possible. And to make matters all the more traumatic and intense, I then underwent an unmedicated DNC. So, all of that to say that, this experience transformed the course of my personal life and of my professional life. I had been sitting across from women and families hearing about the pain and anguish, the feelings of isolation and alienation in the aftermath of pregnancy and infant loss. But until I went through it firsthand, I had no idea, not from a corporeal perspective, at least. Of course, theoretically, I had read every book, I had gone to the conferences, I knew as much as I could and inform myself the best I could. But until it happened to me, I really couldn't relate. And I don't believe that every therapist has to walk in the shoes of all of their patients' experiences. That's just not possible. But because I was hit hard and I let the experience sort of take over me, transform me, I mean, grief has a way of doing that. I decided I needed to do something about the fact that the research shows that a majority of women are reporting self-blame, feelings of shame, feelings of body hatred in the aftermath of loss. And I was just like, this is unacceptable. I mean, on every level. I mean, I had already felt that when I was sitting with patients. It was so heartbreaking to me to hear these powerful women talking about the fact that they felt they had done something to deserve this loss. But then I saw it in the research and was just overwhelmed by how many women feel this way. And I just felt like it was worth the professional risk, if you want to call it that, the vulnerability, to put the contents of my story out there. So in October 2014, so October 15th, which is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Day, I published my first piece with the New York Times, and I was holding a sign that said #IHadAMiscarriage, and you couldn't see my face. I wanted people around the world to be able to envision themselves holding this sign. And the piece was really detailing what I went through, but ultimately it was a compassionate urging of women globally to think about these quiet stories that they may have tucked inside of them that has morphed into shame. And so basically I'm asking, if you haven't shared your story, why? If you feel you did something to deserve this, why? If you're still blaming yourself, why? In no way do I think that every person needs to get on a TED Talk stage or, write a piece for the New York Times. I don't think that being public necessarily transforms our pain. But I worry as a psychologist that for those who keep things so, pushed down or hidden away, that there can be a lot of mental anguish and suffering.
And possibly secondary health challenges, right? Because,
well, that's a good point.
Right? I mean, on a cellular level, the energy has to be stored somewhere, right? It can eat away at you.
Yeah, quite literally. Yes.
Right? And 1 out of every 4 women experience pregnancy loss, more specifically miscarriage, which is such a rough term in and of itself. And I know at one point, right, you were very instrumental in trying to change that vernacular. It feels like the verbiage sticks. A lot of this stuff was created by old white men in so many ways, right? The spontaneous abortion and all the different kinds of things.
Right.
Come on, these things that happen, they were coined by people that physically and anatomically couldn't even bear children.
Right.
So you were very much behind that movement right, of changing some of the vernacular. Have there been more success? Are you seeing more success in the changing of the terms? I know that we're moving more from miscarriage to pregnancy loss, but are there some other, like, I would love your feedback on what you're seeing.
Well, yeah. Why can't we just call it pregnancy loss?
Right.
You know, I mean, it's like it implies that somehow we did something wrong. And I'm not saying that the term, was created to make us feel that way. But I think the fact that so many people do makes a whole lot of sense given the language.
And when you went through your pregnancy loss, which, by the way, that is so traumatic. I mean, the fact that you gave birth
Yes.
at home, right?
I know. It's crazy.
Just the whole experience. I get the chills. How did that impact? I know that it encouraged you to share your voice, but how did that initially play out for you? Like, how did you feel? Did you climb into a hole for a while? Did you come right out? Like, what was your process?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. I know it's true that I, got public about it and have used my experience to help others, but I do think it's important for me to remember, how did I actually feel before I started doing all of that work? I think when you're in the midst of trauma, the focus is survival. So when the baby fell out, I don't know, I was just like, am I going to die? I mean, because when I began to hemorrhage, I've never seen that much blood in my entire life. I just was sitting on the toilet and I just kept flushing the toilet because it wouldn't stop. Yeah. And then to get to my doctor's office, we had to put like a true size bath towel down my pants to get, to drive 15 minutes to my doctor's office because the blood wouldn't stop until the placenta was out. And I don't even remember my husband and I speaking in the car. Like, I feel like I was so numb and so beside myself because I had started spotting a couple days prior, but I went to my doctor and everything looked perfect and the heartbeat was there. But the night before, I was in pain. Like it felt like labor, but so I think I knew what was coming. I've just never heard a story like this before, to be honest. Once I started the I Had a Miscarriage campaign, I did have people reach out to me through DM on Instagram and share some similar stories. But in the context of my office, I've only heard of miscarriage with regard to bleeding and then going to the doctor and having no heartbeat, or a missed miscarriage, going to the doctor, there's no heartbeat, and then they have a medicated DNC. So I just have never heard of something this, dramatic happening.
It's like a movie. It's like a horror movie.
It's like a documentary. It
but
totally is.
Right? Like,
no, it was. And then, I mean, if we're going with the documentary
terrifying
vibes here, or the horror movie, my doctor was like, well, in order to get the placenta, you have to take your pants off. And I was like, I don't think I can, because I was so concerned about the blood. Anyway, I did take my pants off and out came a boulder size, what would you call this? Blood mass. What is that called?
a clot.
A clot. Thank you. I'm, here I am in perimenopause, to the point where the nurse, who I do love, but I don't like that she said this, she was like, oh my goodness, it's like a horror scene in here.
Did you have an out-of-body experience?
I think that's what I mean. Like, I think I just was out of myself and looking down and just being like, you need to survive. Because we already had our son, so like I needed to survive. I needed to get to the other side of this and then sink into the actual feelings, because I was beside myself. I mean, and then we had like a quick chat back and forth about, do we wait for an anesthesiologist? But then I would need a blood transfusion because of, how quickly I was losing blood. Or do we just do this quickly and get it over with, and then I'd be unmedicated? And so, it was just this quick back and forth between me and my doctor about, like, how long will this take? What's the pain level? What will it be like? What will it feel like? What will it sound like? And I was like, well, let's just do it. We got to just do it. We have to just do it. And I figured the pain couldn't be worse than what I had already been through, psychologically, especially, and physically. I will never forget the sound of that machine and like the tugging feeling of pulling out the placenta. And that part was, I had my husband turn music on to like have it close to my ear to kind of drown it out. But that is when I think I felt some sadness, because that was when it was like, this is the last of the pregnancy. And the fetus I could see, on her counter across from me. And it was just like, this is really happening. And I sort of had this moment too of like, I'm never going to be the same. You know how you just know when you're in the midst of trauma that you're just like in slow-mo thinking like, I'm never going to be the same again after this, And then it was over. And then they had me in a wheelchair go down to, my husband went to get the car, and my friend picked up my meds and met us at our house. And then I wasn't pregnant anymore. And I mean, I'm a small framed person. So, being 4 months along meant I looked very pregnant. And then suddenly I wasn't pregnant. And now I was just bleeding and dizzy, like, psychologically dizzy. And then I think it was 2 days later that my milk came in.
Oof.
Just to make matters worse, it just had to keep getting worse. And no one told me that might happen. I don't think my doctor was aware that it would or could.
That feels so early.
I know. I think it's like, it just shows you though, like
your body was mourning.
Yes. And like and how much I felt after my miscarriage, I did not feel the way that, the research shows most women feel. I didn't feel like my body failed me at all. In fact, I felt like it proved that my body worked, because we did get the information back from the testing and there was a chromosomal abnormality. And that was my instinct, because we already had a healthy child. I wasn't worried that something, had happened to me or my body. And yes, my milk coming in felt like, wow, my body thinks there's a baby here, So yes, my body was mourning, and then I was too. And then my anxiety kind of skyrocketed, I think because of the hormonal fluctuation. And also, my son was 3, and we contacted the pediatrician, like, do you have any tips on what to say to him? Because I don't work with children, so I'm not used to, figuring these things out. And we decided just to say to him, we thought mommy was pregnant, and it turns out she wasn't, because too complex, I thought, to introduce death or demise at that point in time. Later, and I detail this in my first book, we did share with him, of course, later what happened, but he was too young at that point, and I didn't want to scare him and make him think that I could die, or that in a future pregnancy he'd be worried about me or the potential baby. Interestingly and somewhat shockingly, I went back to work rather quickly. The following Monday I did.
Rather quickly indeed.
Yeah. And it's funny because right now I can't seem to remember what day of the week my loss happened. And that means it's been the amount of time it's been, which is 12 years. So it's kind of shows how time, changes things. I think it was on a Tuesday, and I went back to work on Monday. Yes. And then it poses a whole other, series of questions and concerns for myself and for even my field, I guess you could say. I mean, I work for myself, so I didn't have HR to turn to. I think had I had a boss or an HR in place, hopefully they would have said, take sick leave, or we could have negotiated something. I mean, bereavement leave isn't national yet, as far as I know, not here anyway. So because of the work I do, I think I was concerned to take too much time off. I thought my patients would worry about me, because I had to convey to them in email, I'm not going to be here for the next few days. I don't even remember what I said. It's in my first book. And then I had to sit with them and basically sit across from people either dealing with fertility struggles, pregnancy loss, stillbirth, infant loss, twin loss, just the list goes on. And I had to be honest with them, of course, because I'm this person in their life. And why would I not be honest? But also a therapist is not usually telling their patients about their personal lives. And yet, because my body was so physically, showing my 4 month in pregnancy, I couldn't not share.
How is it like to hold space for someone else while you were going through so much?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple of patients left pretty soon thereafter. I think that my loss for them was quite triggering. I think some people in sort of a moment of magical thinking can believe that pregnancy loss is somehow contagious. And so I think the fact that it happened to me meant like, wait, this could happen to them. Someone actually said that to me. Like, if this can happen to you, it means it can happen to me. So that was difficult. I felt like for me, returning to work was helpful. But again, do I wish I had taken more time now in retrospect? Probably. But at the time, I thought, I want to be of service. I need to not be laying here thinking about myself, and focusing on other people felt like a helpful antidote. And then I would get in my car, though, to drive home afterward and sob because I would remember my life again. It was a complicated time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Was it also triggering for you to hear other people's stories of pregnancy loss when it was still so fresh for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I worry that people who had earlier losses felt that they somehow couldn't relish the pain they were in front of me because mine was so insane. Mine was so late and at home and alone and cutting the umbilical cord, like just all of these details that most people don't have. But I did my best to reassure them that pain is pain. And when it's yours, it's everything. And so mine was 16 weeks, yours is 6 weeks. It's just as significant on the pain scale internally. Like, we don't need to have some hierarchy for grief. No one wins an award for having the most grief.
It's not the pain Olympics.
No, it sure isn't. And I don't know. I don't know if it was triggering for me. I think if anything, I was like, what's about to happen here? Like, there was just such a curiosity around, like, I'm assuming this is going to just make me a better therapist. Like, and it's not like, oh, I thought because I specialized in this that I wouldn't go through it. But now that I had, I was like, to be sure, I will have more compassion. I will have more of an embodied response to people. And even today, this many years later, new patients coming to me, especially if they don't mention that they've read my book, my first book, I don't say anything about my story unless they bring it up. Most people that come to me, though, have somehow, come across my work and they know that I have experience with this. But it was really only that initial sort of cadre of people who were there with me when it happened that I told. And then my name got around, though, because I was writing so much about loss. But again, I just didn't bring it up in the context of my office unless they did.
And when your book came out, and correct me if I'm not remembering this part accurately, but when your book came out, I Had a Miscarriage, weren't you diagnosed with breast cancer around that same period of time?
Right. So that's right. My first book came out in March of 2021. And then I had felt a lump in my breast in, I would say, November, December of the year prior, just a few months prior. And I was getting vaccinated. I was able to get vaccinated for COVID in February, I think. Healthcare workers were getting it February. And I had seen my OBGYN and she felt it and she said she thought it was nothing but to schedule a mammogram as soon as I felt comfortable, meaning as soon as I was vaccinated. And so I did. But I waited for it to be 2 weeks after my book came out. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
And what was your reaction to that? I mean, outside of the fact that you're like, shit, the timing.
I mean, yeah, I tried to tell myself, which was true. I had pre-planned so much for the book in advance. So even though I would have probably done, I don't know, a handful of additional interviews after my diagnosis that I promptly, declined, I felt like the book swirl had really done its magic and had, really hopefully gotten to women around the world in a way that I felt very proud of and gratified by. It didn't feel like it sort of like clipped or eclipsed, I should say, my experience of the book, but it did make me feel like Miscarriage had seen better days. The truth is, I was writing this book knowing that I had been writing about the topic for about 10 years. And that this was not my parting gift to my community, but sort of like a bookend. I wasn't going to talk about miscarriage for the rest of my life. I mean, look at me now. I guess I am. But
we're going to talk about the evolution of that, right? Because
yes, but right. I mean, it's like it's an integral part of my life and my identity and my work. And so, it's sort of what I guess I became like known for, if you want to call it that. But when diagnosed with a life-threatening illness, miscarriage had no more place for me. Like I was like, I can't like post on Instagram for my followers, more free content about various aspects of life after loss. Like that's just not going to happen. And so this then too changed the course of things significantly. I mean, at this point, my kids were 12 and 7, and that was my focus. My focus was, will I live or die? And will my kids have a mother or be motherless? And it's yet another topic that women probably blame themselves for. I've written a handful of articles about sort of what I see as like the alienation of some women. Some people like the term, but the term warrior. And we didn't even go over the platitudes that accompany pregnancy loss yet. But when I was sharing initially about my diagnosis, a lot of people were like, but you've got this, you're a warrior, you're so strong, you're going to beat this. And I was just taken by, because I was feeling so raw, so vulnerable, just so, I don't know, I don't even know the words. Like I just was thrown into another galaxy.
Of course you were. And I almost wonder, as you're saying this, it's like, once again, you are in a survival phase, no? Am I wrong?
Yes. I mean, it felt different. Like the miscarriage was like so physically like intense. And then it was like that, do I get pregnant again? And then being pregnant again after that, and like not being able to breathe for 9-10 months, pregnant with my daughter, which, I got pregnant 3 months after my loss. So that was insane to like have it be that back to back. But I felt because of my age that we didn't really have a lot of time to just sit back and grieve. And so, yes, this felt like survival mode, but deeply philosophical too. It was like a call to ask myself, why are we so afraid in this culture of death? How do I feel about dying? Like I had to go there. I mean, maybe some people wouldn't, a lot of people in my family even, and I come from a family of a lot of doctors, but people were like, no one dies from breast cancer anymore. Like, you've got this. And I'm like, huh? What do you mean? Like, of course people die from breast cancer.
Of course they do.
Right.
How scary. And
that was the thing. It was like, this is truly, I mean, with the miscarriage, like the hemorrhaging was terrifying. And I could have died, I guess,
Yes.
if I just like fell down and my husband didn't come home and no one called an ambulance. Like, yeah, definitely. But this now was like, oh, I have 2 kids and I have a full life. I mean, I have a husband too, but like, the kids are what I was the most worried about because I'm their mother. And I don't know, it like begged me to investigate how I really feel about death and dying. And even though that sounds so intense, and I think a lot of people maybe would just focus on like, nope, here's the plan and here's the treatment I'm doing. And I'm just going to get through this and we're just going to be warriors about it. I mean, I hoped I would survive, of course, but like my sort of initial place was to go to the darkness, not because I'm inclined to be dark all the time, but more so because I felt like it would help me be less scared if I could understand how I really felt about death. And what I came up with, which I'm sure is super common. I haven't looked at the research on this, but I think we're most afraid of it. Number one, because culture doesn't talk about it. But for me, it was like the pain that I imagine people are in just before dying, like the physical pain.
Yourself? Or you're
Yeah.
talking about the people around you that are experiencing it?
Myself. Like if I were to have gotten worse and been close to death, like what's my biggest fear? My fear was being physically so uncomfortable or in pain,
Understood.
And then of course, like I've said many times already, the idea of leaving my children
Sure.
and everybody.
Of course.
Like I even remember I turned to somebody that I'm close to and even asked if they would take over my Instagram account if something were to happen to me. Like, I mean, I just got, you can't not. I mean, it's cancer. You can't not investigate, the potential there. So, but, yes, the survival mode of like, let me get the best team and let me get a second opinion, maybe a third opinion. Let me have this scan and that blood test and like the amount of appointments and blood draws. It was horrible.
So, what is your view on life now that you've experienced the possibility of death?
I'm not like a silver linings person, and I'm not one necessarily to kind of push gratitude. I think there can be a balance. Like we can be grieving and be grateful. We can be grateful and be grieving. Like we can be in pain and experience pleasure. We can experience pleasure and be in pain. So I think it can all coexist. And so it's not like I've sort of tried to coax myself into being this person who's like, I have a new lease on life. I'm never going to complain about anything ever again. Or like, I don't feel that way.
I don't
feel
think that's
grateful.
human.
No, I mean, but there are those people who just like decide like, nothing's going to get me down now. And it's like, well, that doesn't seem very reasonable. Because life is still happening. So yeah, I mean, I guess like the miscarriage, it was like, okay, I got to get through all the physical stuff, like the first surgery, and then decided about reconstruction and radiation every day for 5 weeks. And it felt like it went on and on. I mean, it took up the reconstruction, those surgeries took up a year of my life. And that was all very humbling. So when you ask, how do I view life now? It's like, I am so grateful to be here, and I'll take every minute I can get. I mean, there are no guarantees, and I, just have to hope that, my health is okay and I keep on keeping on.
What was your initial reaction to sort of confronting the possibility of death? And I ask that because did it make you depressed? Did it ignite you to say, all right, I'm going to throw everything at this to me? Like, what was your evolution of it? My dad passed of a glioblastoma in 2022. That's kind of when I started to fall off the grid. My dad was diagnosed in August. I knew something was going on. I didn't know what it was. I really pushed him. My dad was a surgeon, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Ear, nose, throat, and then plastic. He was very educated, dare I say brilliant. He loved life. Like he was very adventurous. When he was diagnosed, I think in one way he was very like, this is not gonna take me down. At the
Right.
same time, it was really hard to see sort of the depression that ensued, but that he tried to hide it so
Yes.
much from
Yeah.
me and my sister. Like he really tried, like I could see that he was. And also when I was going with him to see the doctors and I was watching, like when I was having the conversation with the doctors with my dad and seeing the angst and
Oh.
the realization of their own mortality while they were talking to my dad. I mean, some of these people were they were they're younger,
Colleagues.
you know, but like people at one point he had considered colleagues, even if they were younger.
Wow.
And so he knew some of them. Right. And it was hard to watch. The reason I'm asking you this is because there are so many feels, and I know that things can coexist. And I watched my dad have highs and disguised lows because he didn't want me to see him during those moments. He'd say, I have to rest now. And like, you know, and like, that's
it's emotional.
hard, you know? So
This
I'm like,
was
I'm listening to you say this
hard.
and it's like, how was it to be in that place where, you know, you are seeing the hardest possibility. And then when you overcame that hard possibility, like, of course it's like winning the lottery, but also like that's got to still be so hard to have that memory. So I'm asking how you felt that whole way.
I mean, I remember getting the call from my doctor and I went to work anyway, which is just insane. Here I go again with going back to work. But again, it's such a intimate field. So to email a patient I was supposed to see in an hour to tell her that I was diagnosed with cancer just wasn't going to work.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And you were so honest.
I didn't know what else to do because it can be, of course, you know, the focus of my second book is about replacing silence as storytelling. It's about shame. And so it's like, I do think that therapists can actually create shame in their patients when they don't answer certain questions directly. And I get into that in this book a little bit. Oftentimes, I don't answer questions directly because I don't think it will necessarily help them. But some of these patients have known me for 10, 15 years. Like, I'm not going to hide this from them. But at the end of that day, yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know. I wouldn't say I went into depression because there was so much to navigate, but I was incredibly anxious. I remember not being able to eat for a few days because I was just so torn up. And I remember, you know, just hiding under my covers while my kids weren't home, you know, like I couldn't make sense of it. I mean, and not even like, oh, why me? But just like, what? Like, what? And I don't know. I think I sort of somehow, though, with, I guess, the reassurance and evidence that the doctors shared and the clear path forward. I mean, they weren't worried. It's not like, I think it's, you know, it wasn't like they thought that this death was imminent, but I think I went there just in case. And I went there because the word cancer elicits that, or it does for me anyway.
Well, if you had done nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I asked my brother that because he's an interventional radiologist. And I was like, what if I chose to do nothing? And he's like, you know what? And actually my dad, who's also a doctor, was there. And he was like, that's craziness, Jessica. Like, don't even entertain that. And my brother, though, was like, that is a brilliant question. And he's like, I wish more patients would ask that question. Meaning we have choice, because sometimes these surgeries and these treatments kill you in a different way, you know? And so we should be able to ask ourselves, like, what do I want to do? What can I muster? And I knew that I would do stuff because I was 47 and I was going to try, but it was helpful that my brother sort of had that response. And then I focused on the surgery. It's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I had a very sort of loving relationship with my breasts. Like they were definitely, I didn't realize it, but they were a central part of my identity as a young woman and as an older woman. I had always sort of liked that part of my body, and they fit well with my frame. And I took them for granted. And so that was a grief that I needed to contend with just before the mastectomy. I decided to do a bilateral mastectomy because it was identified that I had a gene, not BRCA, but the CHEK2 gene that's on my dad's side of the family. I'm the first woman in my family to be diagnosed with breast cancer, though. But it didn't make sense to think about keeping one and then worrying about that one. And I just thought, let's start all over, both sides. And, the truth is, looking back, so that was in May of 2021, that surgery was the easiest surgery of all. And I woke up in good spirits. My brother, because he was doing his residency at UCLA at the time, was there when I woke up, which was like, I could cry over that because thank God. And my dad was here because he's, my rock. And so he, of course, came to town for that. 2 days later, I was hiking.
It's amazing.
With drains. I felt fine. I know I have known enough, other people who have gone through breast cancer at this point that it's not always that way with the expanders, and, there can be pain. I had no pain with that initial surgery. The time though, when I started to feel depressed or lost or just a lot more sort of down was during radiation. That summer, I had to do 5 weeks of daily radiation. And that was the first time that I felt like a true patient because, you go into this locker room, it's not very personal, and put on a gown and you sit and wait with the rest of the people, of all ages. And it was a mind fuck. And anyway, I won't take you through that, but they situate you on the table. It's not very comfortable. And they put music on and ask what you prefer as if, you want to be there at all. And I would just cry. I don't know. It just was so intense. And radiation creates burns. So, and I knew that going into it. So I was applying, ointments and stuff, but by the end of the 5 weeks, I was fried on the one side, which is just, on every level, it kept being more and more intense. And I knew that I was getting closer and closer to being done, but each twist and turn brought new feelings and, newfound sort of outlook on life, but also just on my own psychology.
How have your experiences impact you as a mother?
So my kids are now 16 and 11, which is absolutely insane to me at this point that I have a 16-year-old who drives. But I feel I kind of lucked out in some regard in terms of the timing of stuff because they seem okay from me going through that. I think my son was worried and we read a book together that sort of explained the process. And upon hearing that the doctors were fully positive that I would get through this and be okay, he seemed to hear that, feel that, and then kind of move forward. And my daughter, I think, was too young, to fully comprehend what does cancer mean. And I wrote a piece about her getting in the shower with me after I think my first surgery and just commenting on my body. And, so we've talked about changes in my body and what that means and how it feels. Somehow I think I've done my best to remain as present as possible with them. Do I look back and think ugh, was I not there for periods in a way that I feel proud of? Probably. But what was I to do? I think even when I was laying here, I was still involved in their lives. I hope that Well, and they said this, they wrote me these cards the other day. My book came out in April, and my second book, and they wrote me these cards. And the cards kind of say it all in terms of, I think, the mothering that I've been able to accomplish with them. Because both of them, I can even show you my daughters, but, both of them are basically saying, we've watched you persevere. Like, this is not just your first book, but your second book, and what a role model you are. And,
Oh.
the passion that you have and the tenacity. I mean, they didn't use that word, but just like, they've seen it from the start and that now it's out in the world. And I think like that's just a beautiful thing for them to see. And especially through the cancer, the fact that I somehow mustered the energy to write another book. I mean, it even baffles me, to be honest.
So let's talk about your new book. You wrote a book called Normalize It, and you've got this quest to erase the stigma around so much of the conversation that isn't happening around women, and that we've been societally conditioned to not speak about these things, and it creates further issue. So what was the inspiration? When was that moment where you thought, I have to normalize these conversations?
Yeah. So I think it was maybe 6 months after I was diagnosed, this mental health publisher came to me and asked me to write a book. And that kind of served in some ways as a lifeline. Like, I mean, it was equal parts like, well, I'm crazy to take on a project right now, but also like, well, if I have a project and a focus and I can keep at my sort of stigma smashing, like this could be great, So I decided to do it, although the timeline, of course, changed because of how much time the surgeries took up. And they wanted me to do something. They were pretty open about, what this book would be. I mean, they just wanted it to be something within my specialty area. And I thought a lot about it. And I was like, actually, I've been talking about miscarriage and pregnancy loss and life after for a decade. And I've been talking about the silent stigma and shame that swirl around it. But what about the silent stigma and shame that swirl through women's lives more broadly? So this book starts with menstruation, girlhood, and covers loads of topics all the way through to menopause and then some. And of course, not the sort of physical or medical aspects, but the psychological. And what does it do to girls and women to live in a society that tells us to be quiet about these monumental milestones in our lives? And some of us don't even know how it's impacted us. And I think that's kind of the beauty of this book. It is a compassionate request or a compassionate, urging. I think I said that already, though, about my first New York Times piece, which is interesting because maybe that's my through line. But, to investigate, to ask themselves, in what ways have I been quiet about my pain points or about things that have happened to me that are important, that deserve more airtime, that need to be discussed in a therapy office or in a journal or with a close friend or in a support group? And so it's kind of an expansion. I mean, it feels so aligned with all of the other work that I've done. And it was interesting because for a while there, I was like, what is this book? What am I doing? And then I found my sea legs and it came together. And actually the other day I was rereading part of it, getting ready for an event, and I was happy. And that felt really good, because it's such a relationship when you write a book. It's like there's just so many twists and turns, like some days feeling so connected to it and other days being like, this is crap. And, and everything in between. So I feel really proud of this. And my hope is that it inspires people, that it makes people feel seen and heard and acknowledged, and that, it allows people to feel like, hey, maybe maybe I will try. Maybe I will say a little bit more of my truth out loud and take that risk. And because my thing is like, we can't control how other people take in our stories. We can't control if people will have open arms. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll judge us, actually. Maybe they'll reject us. Importantly, we're doing it for ourselves, first and foremost. Even if the reaction we get isn't great, we can remind ourselves that we took that step, that we opened up, that we didn't let something that happened to us live in silence in our bodies.
Totally. And I think 999 times out of 1,000, right? The responses are going to be positive, especially if these are people that, care or are, good, empathetic people. And it's telling about that one person anyway. It's like, I remember being so nervous to put out there that I was having fertility challenges. This is back in 2016, 17. And I started a blog. I was in corporate America and started this blog knowing full well that I could keep those lives very separate. And I did that intentionally. But I knew that if I put that out there, that I could possibly face rejection. And I was so afraid of that.
Yes.
And I put out this email and I curated the list. I'm not going to lie. I curated the list and it was like, oh gosh, like several hundred people, like whatever. And I was like, okay, let's see what happens. And the response I got was overwhelming, like overwhelmingly positive,
Yes.
I only had one person that I knew that responded to me and said something to the effect of, please take me off of these emails. And I knew her and I was like, okay, but what I realized shortly thereafter, and I'm sort of in this space in general now, is it wasn't personal. It actually had nothing to do with me. It had something very much to do with what was happening in her life. And maybe she was actually going through the same thing, but she couldn't. But I'll never know. And quite frankly, it's not your business.
Right?
Yeah,
totally.
And I actually feel like, wow, that's sad that she, whatever her truth is, she can't find her voice. But like, that's not my issue. It's
right.
It's an interesting, and that was her choice, and it's not personal. Yep. But now,
yes,
the taking things not personally is an amazing lesson that comes out of actually getting just a little tiny dose of what we think is rejection, but it's really not.
Yeah, because it's the one person, and it's so fascinating how it can be one person, and then we could obsess about it all day.
Oh, totally! Like plays in your mind, maybe for weeks.
Exactly, and then you're like, wait a second, this is so not, this is not productive.
Totally. It's nothing to do with us, actually.
It has nothing to, exactly. But I think women are more prone, it seems like, to take things personally. And again, it's like, did I do something wrong? Should I not have sent this? Was it bad that I blah, blah, blah? Am I bad because I blah, blah, blah? Like all of the kind of what ifs and like, maybe I shouldn't have. When in fact, nobody else wrote that back to you. And everybody else was so amazed by you or, enlightened or inspired. So that was the risk worth taking for sure.
Right. Like your books, they're worth the risk, right? And you're helping support other people and you're helping people feel seen and heard. And maybe they're not going to share their story, but they don't feel alone anymore. And I think that's what's
the hope.
So important about if you have the gumption, the tenacity, right? And you're going to share your voice, know that it's making a difference. And it's even in the doctor's office, like even advocating for yourself and asking questions.
That's right.
Like it blows my mind when people don't ask questions. Like I loved your question earlier to your own family about who are doctors, about like what would happen if I didn't do treatment. Like you think about, of course, like it's important to ask the questions for your own edification, but also to make it known. I mean, in your case, it was your family, but to make it known that you're gonna be a squeaky wheel. You're gonna be a pain in the ass until you get the answer that you need.
Yes, and just that we're curious about our own health.
Yes.
I mean, I think that this brings up a whole other topic about like the patient doctor relationship and how we are taught to just be, quote unquote, good patients and just do what the doctor says. But I mean, we need to know why, and we need to know our options, and we need to know what the outcome will be. I mean, we can't just kind of be robotic about our own health. I mean, that's not a wise way to go, I don't think.
Right. That we are attached to our bodies. Our bodies are us. And I feel like, and I learned this during infertility, that I really like had this separate relationship between my body and my mind. It was like, that was my out of body, right? Like different, totally. But like everyone has these experiences, and a lot of women, at least I didn't know about all the things. Sex ed was pitiful back in the day,
it's
right?
terrible. Yes.
Oh my gosh. It was like, if you have sex, you're going to get pregnant or maybe get an STD. So you might get pregnant and die. You know what I mean? Like these were your options.
It's not even funny. I laugh
but it's so silly.
It's so ridiculous.
I
and
know.
It also, why can't they include that not every pregnancy works out, so that you would have known as, at least then when you, came upon infertility, you would have remembered, oh, I did hear about this when I was 10 or whatever. Like, even they don't need to drive it home. They don't need to scare anybody, but it's just, it has to be integrated, because it is a normative outcome, pregnancy, having a loss, or potentially not being able to get pregnant or stay pregnant. We have to know about these things earlier on.
Yes. And let's talk about peri and menopause, right? Like that whole entire discussion, like it almost goes back to the root of, remember, when people, even men back in the day, would say things, maybe, I don't know, maybe they still say this, but are you on your period? Like, because you're acting like da, da, da. It's like being called crazy when you're pregnant.
Yes.
You're like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm going to murder you. Right? It's
now
like,
I'm crazy because you're making me crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like peri and meno seem to be like that same sort of like, it's this, oh, ew, what is that weird thing? Don't talk about it. It's so gross. But like, I would love for you to talk for a second about, what do you wish, knowing what you know now, what do you wish that women knew about peri and menopause?
Well, it's interesting. I'm still flirting with menopause. I'm in perimenopause myself. I just wish that we were informed about it way earlier on in our lives, and not as a scare tactic, and not as aging sucks, but just information.
Yeah.
We need to know what's going to happen. And it is different for everybody. I hear that perimenopause can last up to 10 years for some, and others maybe just seamlessly kind of get through it and don't have a lot of symptoms. So, but I think it needs to come out of the shadows. I know that there's all these books coming out about it right now, which is terrific. We need to make it so that women aren't feeling like it's somehow the end of their time here. Right. And so I tried to, in the final chapter of the book, the patient example I use is, this badass woman, and she's not hating menopause. I didn't want to have the example be that the person is miserable and that it's the worst thing ever. And there's a lot of wisdom that comes with aging too. And a lot of us really enjoy that part, And she talks about, though, what it's like to no longer be objectified and no longer be sort of slammed by the male gaze or even the female gaze, because she's this very attractive person and works in a field where there's lots of people and celebrity types and stuff. And so she's changed, but she is able to sort of talk about what she gains through the change and what she loses through this change. And I think if we had enough information and if these conversations were free flowing, we could see it that way. We could, be sad that, we're not as perky, but we can also be excited about what we're diving into intellectually.
It's so interesting to me. I only recently learned in the last few years, it's kind of funny, like in the last few years, that menopause is the end. When you have menopause, it's over. Like it's not people, because you hear this sort of like misguided, conversation, like, oh, she's going through menopause. know she's going through perimenopause because menopause is the end. It means it's over. It's done. Like you no longer bleed.
Yes.
Like if I'm going to be just super direct and, if you will, crass, but why is that crass if it's just real?
It's not.
But do you know what I mean? Like there's this,
totally.
You don't talk about these things. It's an interesting dynamic.
It is. And why?
Why?
And why is blood seen as so unsexy when we
gross
are the ones
and gory
and gross? And it's like, but wait, we're also expected to produce children. So you don't think that's unsexy until you do, if we don't lose the weight within 24 hours after having a child. You know, so there's just so many contradictions. It's hard to keep up with.
There's so many contradictions. And it's important to talk about it, right? Because I think it demystifies so many elements. And it would just be so easy if we learned all of this going in, and then we wouldn't have this extra burden on our shoulders.
I agree.
That creates a stigma.
That's right.
It's like this,
and the silence and the shame. It's just this like
shame.
swirling trifecta. Yeah. I think if we had the information early, we could navigate this very differently. And then hopefully we would then impart that to our children.
The whole Golden Girls thing, it's like so funny because I also recently discovered that like most of the Golden Girls were actually like not that old. I think Blanche was like 43.
What?
Yeah. She's like 43 or something like that, or in her early 40s. And some of the other ones are like in their 50s and 60s. And you know what I mean? Like
amazing.
It's mind blowing because they look, in this day and age, they look like they are all like 60 something plus.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
It's crazy.
That is so funny. Now you're making me want to go watch that. Yeah. I need to look back at that.
Do you harbor a meaningful truth that you have yet to say out loud that you feel would be inspirational for yourself and also for other women? Like, is there anything in this book that you want to elaborate on?
I guess I just want to elaborate on the complexity, of life and being a human. And so I think it can be tempting for people to put us on pedestals if we have some big platform or have books or seem accomplished and all this stuff, and think like, oh, because this person speaks so openly about stuff, her whole life is put together. And I would like to, dismantle that, because of course, everybody's just doing the best that they can. And yeah, I think that that's a truth I'll continue to put out there. I mean, I think I already do say that, but I may as well continue. I'm just kind of trying to say that, like, just, we can put people on pedestals thinking that they have it all together, but they don't. That's all you have to use from that if you want.
I think that actually could go into such a longer discussion about.
Yeah.
And also people don't need to share their entire lives with the
agree.
world too. I think that you share what you feel moved to share, but also, and although we should have these conversations, not all of them have to be publicly, but I do think you shared a lot about that earlier too.
I did say that. And that's strewn throughout the book, that I do not think people have to say things publicly, for sure. Yes.
I would love to take us back to this question.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing what you know now, what would you do all over again?
Knowing what I know now, I would love to sort of have even more self-compassion through the hard things and really work to extinguish the anxiety that I had during them, which again, during stuff like that, though, it's hard to do. But I think looking back, I wish I could just tell myself that, anxiety isn't going to change the outcome.
Parting words. Do you have any words of wisdom that you would share with all women if you had the platform to do so?
I would just say to believe that what you've lived through matters, and no matter sort of how you share it. It can be in a journal. It can be publicly. It can be whispered in the ear of a neighbor. But we deserve to get our stories outside of our bodies into the world again, even if it's a journal that we burn. It's about moving it through. It's about acknowledging the truths of our lives. And we all deserve to do that.
1,000%. Secrets make you sick, right?
Exactly. They sure do.
Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a pleasure to see you and get to catch up. And
It was wonderful. Thank you so much for these beautiful questions and for having me share so much of my life.
I'm honored. Thank you.